All right, let's dive in head first into this whole Rubio trip to Central America thing. Secretary of State Marco Rubio, early February 2025, big trip. And we've got a lot to unpack here. We've got news articles, opinion pieces. We even found a briefing document.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's pretty wild. And, it's really interesting because it covers everything from illegal immigration to President Trump's kind of desire to get the Panama Canal back.
Yeah, that's a big one.
It's a lot, Yeah. And then on top of that, you have this whole America First thing, and they're trying to convince everybody that it doesn't mean isolationist.
Oh, it's a lot to sort through for sure. There's a lot going on.
Yeah, for sure. So let's start with the official reason for the trip, right? Tackling illegal immigration. I mean, that's priority number one for Trump administration. It's clear as day. If you look at the State Department's mission statement, I mean, it's laser focused on this. Securing America's borders, stopping illegal and destabilizing migration, and repatriation of illegal immigrants. I mean, that's it.
That's the focus.
That's the focus. But what I find interesting is why now? You know what I mean? Why is this issue taking center stage right now?
Well, I mean, you can't deny that it's all over the headlines right now,
Yeah.
Migration is a hot topic.
Yeah.
And, the administration's under a ton of pressure. They promise stricter border control, less immigration, and people want to see that happen.
Yeah.
So by going on this trip, by working directly with Central American countries, the administration is trying to show they are doing something. They are in control.
It's all about image.
Well, to some extent, yeah.
Yeah. And Tammy Bruce, she's the State Department spokeswoman. She's definitely working that angle. Calling the trip a quote-unquote serious approach to understanding and addressing the root causes of migration. Do you think that framing, do you think it resonates with people, especially those who are skeptical of the administration?
It's smart, right? I mean, on the surface, it sounds good because it kind of pushes back on that narrative that the administration only cares about enforcement. It makes it look like they are taking the issue seriously, that they actually want to collaborate with other countries.
Yeah.
But, I mean, that's the question, isn't it? Will there be any real action behind those words? Will it actually lead to meaningful change?
Right, because talking about root causes is one thing, but actually, doing something to address them?
Totally.
That's a whole other ballgame.
Exactly, because you've got to tackle those issues head on. Poverty, violence, lack of opportunity, all of that. You can't just, snap your fingers and expect them to go away.
It's not magic.
Right, exactly.
And that's where things get tricky. Because you have this America First policy, right, which sometimes seems like it's putting American interests, first, above everything else.
Yeah.
And so how do you reconcile that with actually addressing root causes in other countries? It almost feels like a contradiction.
It does, yeah.
And then on top of all of this, we have this whole Panama Canal thing. I mean, President Trump, he's been pretty clear. He wants it back. He says Panama's not honoring agreements, that China's gaining influence. I mean, it's a pretty bold move.
It is. And it adds a whole other level of, tension to the situation.
Totally. And Panamanian officials, they deny all of this, by the way. They're like, what are you talking about? So you have this back and forth going on.
It's messy.
Yeah, it's messy. And it makes you wonder, what's really going on here? What are the real motives?
Yeah.
So how do you think all of this plays into Rubio's visit? I mean, he's supposed to address these concerns while he's there. I mean, it seems like he's walking into a bit of a minefield.
Well, he's definitely got his work cut out for him, right? I mean, he has to find a way to keep the president happy, but also maintain a good relationship with Panama. It's a tough spot to be in.
A delicate dance.
Exactly.
And then, you have this other thing, this thing that really jumped out at me. The fact that Rubio's mission statement doesn't mention democracy, human rights, or economic prosperity at all. Not once. It's kind of strange, right?
It is.
Yes.
It's like they're trying to avoid those topics altogether.
Yeah, and Andres Oppenheimer, he's a well-respected journalist.
Yeah.
He wrote this really scathing piece about it. He says this creates a negative agenda, that it could backfire in a big way.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's right, because by just focusing on security and migration, it kind of sends the message that the U.S. only cares about itself. We're only involved in Central America because it benefits us,
right,
not because we actually care about the people who live there.
Exactly. And Oppenheimer, he argues that if you really want to address migration, you have to address the lack of democratic freedoms in countries like Venezuela, Cuba, Nicaragua. I mean, it makes sense, right? If people don't have basic rights, if they're living in fear, they're going to try to leave.
Of course.
So yeah, we have this official focus on migration and security, but it feels like the bigger picture is a lot more complicated.
Oh, it definitely is.
Yeah.
There's more going on beneath the surface.
For sure. And there's this potential for conflict, not just between the U.S. and its neighbors, but within the administration itself. I mean, you have these different factions, different agendas.
It'll be interesting to see how it all shakes out.
Absolutely. It's going to be a wild ride, that's for sure. Yeah, like all this stuff simmering under the surface. It's kind of like, the official story isn't the whole story.
Right. Like one of those things that's not being talked about a lot is Rubio himself and whether his own views really line up with some of the Trump people,
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. I mean, he's been a big supporter of democracy, especially in those countries, Cuba and Venezuela.
Right.
But now he's working for an administration that well, maybe they're not so idealistic, They're willing to compromise to get what they want.
That's a good point. Like think about Richard Grenell.
Yeah.
Trump's guy in Venezuela. He's already talking with the Maduro regime.
Yeah.
And that has a lot of people worried, including Oppenheimer.
Right.
He thinks this could lead to this oil for deportees deal, where we keep buying oil from Venezuela if they take back our deported migrants.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that'd be controversial. I mean, I guess on the one hand, it solves a couple of problems, right? You got deportations and we need oil.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, it's basically saying that the Maduro regime is okay. And they're not exactly known for respecting human rights or democracy or any of that.
So where does that leave Rubio? I mean, it seems like he's kind of caught in the middle here. His own beliefs, the administration's policies, and what's actually happening in these countries. Like, how much can he really control on this trip?
That's the thing, isn't it? I mean, we know Trump likes to have people around him who agree with him.
Right. Yeah.
And they have their own agendas.
Yeah.
So maybe Rubio's vision for this trip is getting kind of squeezed by these bigger objectives, even if he doesn't personally agree.
Makes you think about this whole America First thing again, right? Because they're trying to use this trip to prove that it doesn't mean isolationist. Like, hey, look, we're engaging with Central America, but sending the Secretary of State to a place they've basically ignored for years. Like, does that really convince anyone? Is America First really about anything more than just looking inward?
Well, it looks good, right?
Yeah.
Being engaged is good for your image, especially when everyone's saying you're not engaged. But it all comes down to what actually happens, Is it just a show, or are they really going to work with these countries and try to fix things together?
It's like you got to walk the walk, right? Not just talk the talk.
Exactly.
And especially with these potential deals with regimes like Maduro's. Like, on the one hand, you're talking about promoting democracy, but then you're making deals with dictators who are doing the opposite. I mean, it's kind of hard to make sense of that.
Yeah, there's definitely a tension there. And it makes you wonder what this trip is really about. I mean, is it about helping the U.S. or is it about helping those countries or is there a way to do both? Like, how does that even work?
It's like this test for Rubio almost. Like, can he be a good diplomat? Can he represent the Trump administration? Can he, juggle all these competing things and actually make something good happen?
Yeah, he's got a lot on his plate.
And then there's the Panama Canal on top of it all.
Oh, right. Yeah, that's a whole other issue. I mean, with Trump wanting to, take it back, how do you think that's going to play out?
I mean, it's a powder keg waiting to go off.
Yeah.
He has to say something about Panama supposedly not keeping their end of the bargain, keep Trump happy.
Right.
But he also can't just blow up the relationship with Panama. They've been, a solid ally for us. So how do you thread that needle?
Yeah, that's tough. Keep the president happy, but not, mess things up with an ally.
It's like it really shows how hard it is to be a diplomat these days, with all this political stuff going on.
Absolutely.
Okay, let's shift gears a bit. We talked a little about nearshoring earlier. Can you break that down a little more? Like, what is it and what are the good and bad things about moving factories from China to Latin America?
Yeah, so nearshoring is basically like bringing the factories closer to home.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of everything being made in China, we make it in Latin America instead.
Correct.
And the idea is that creates jobs, it helps their economies grow, and then people won't want to leave and come here as much.
Right. And it also means we're not so dependent on China, right? Especially now with all the tension between the US and China.
Exactly. But there's also downsides. I mean, you'd have to spend a lot of money to build up those countries, roads, power plants, all that. And then there's the risk of companies taking advantage of workers or or harming the environment if it's not done right.
Yeah, it's not as simple as just like picking up the factories and moving them.
Right.
Plus, there's the whole, geopolitical angle. China's a big player in Latin America, and if we start moving stuff away from them, they might not be too happy about it.
Yeah, could definitely cause some problems. So
Yeah.
nearshoring, it could be good, but you got to be really careful about how you do it.
Man, it feels like U.S.-Latin America relations are just super complicated right now.
They are. I mean, we have a long history with those countries.
Yeah.
And not all of it's good,
Oh.
And then you add in all the political stuff happening now, and it's a mess.
And Rubio's trip is like right in the middle of all that. He's trying to do all these different things at once, and it's not clear how it's all going to shake out. It's a story that's still being written,
It is. And it'll be interesting to see what happens next.
So we've been digging into this Rubio trip, and it seems like there's this real tension between like the immediate stuff people want and the long-term, bigger picture stuff,
Totally. I mean, you can understand why everyone's focused on stopping migration right now. There's a lot of pressure on the administration to do something about it.
Right.
But is building walls and deporting people really a solution? Or are we just going to be having this same conversation in 5 years, 10 years?
Exactly. It goes back to like actually fixing the problems that are making people leave those countries in the first place. If we're not dealing with poverty, violence, all of that, are we really solving anything?
And are we even making things worse by just focusing on the symptoms? Like, take that oil for deportees idea with Venezuela. Yeah, it gets rid of some of the migrants and we get oil, but are we really okay with supporting a regime like that? I mean, it just seems like such a bad message to send.
It's like we're so focused on the short term that we're not thinking about the long-term consequences. Is there a way to like change the conversation to focus on something more sustainable?
That's where that nearshoring thing comes in, right?
Yeah.
If we really want to help Central America, if we want to stop people from feeling like they have to leave, we got to help them build up their economies. We got to give them opportunities.
But that takes a huge investment, right? Like way more than we've been willing to give before. And it takes a different way of thinking. Like we have to actually care about what happens in those countries, not just how it affects us.
Exactly. It can't be just about us. We got to see it as a partnership. Helping them actually helps us in the long run.
It's like that saying, a rising tide lifts all boats.
Exactly. A more stable Central America means less crime, less violence, less of everything bad, And that makes the U.S. safer, too.
It's like everyone wins. So as Rubio heads down there, it's not just about America first. He's got to think about all these other things, all these other people. What do you think is going to be the hardest part for him?
Well, he's got to, keep both sides happy. He's got to represent the administration, but he's also got to build relationships with those Central American leaders and find a way to work together. It's a tough job.
It's a huge responsibility, but it's also a huge opportunity. He could really make a difference, change the way we interact with that whole region.
Yeah. Let's hope he's up to the challenge.
Well, we've covered a lot in this deep dive. Migration, security, democracy, the economy, even the Panama Canal. It's complicated stuff.
It is.
But hopefully you have a better understanding now of what Rubio's facing on this trip.
And more importantly, we hope this gets you thinking about the bigger picture. You know, what's the U.S.'s role in all of this? How can we work together with our neighbors? Don't just take our word for it. Keep learning, keep asking questions, keep the conversation going.
This has been The Deep Dive. We'll catch you next time.